Joining us now is somebody that I have a great respect for that doesn't always agree with my political views in any way, shape, matter, or form. But he's talked at length about how we are now in this country criminalizing political differences. He has a brand new book out that is now costing him dearly at Martha's Vineyard, which I'm getting a real kick out of. It's called The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Alan Dershowitz, Professor Dershowitz from Harvard Law School is with us. I'm sorry that I'm getting amused by the happenings on Martha's Vineyard, but it's actually, on the one hand, it's sad, and I'm sorry you have to go through it. It's very sad. On the other hand, I think it is very indicative of the polarization that has gone way off the rails in the country, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. It's not about me on Martha's Vineyard. I could do a few parties. It's about how you can't talk to each other. Look, you and I disagree about so many things, but we talk to each other, we have our disagreements, then we shake hands, and we come back for a next level of agreement or disagreement.
100%.
But today, in America, whether it be on college campuses or when it comes to Supreme Court confirmations, you have to pick sides. And the other side has no virtues, and your side has no vices, and everybody lives in silos, and nobody wants to interact with anybody else, and it's a shame. The folks in the Vineyard have learned their lesson, and they're now back communicating with me. It's in writing now. Now they're writing me emails telling me why I'm wrong. Look, that's
better. That's better. I agree.
Nothing. And then I'm going to have an event at the big theater in Martha's Vineyard where I challenge anybody to come and ask me questions, and I will not leave the event until every critical question, every critical statement has been made. That's what town halls are about. That's what democracy is about. But saying that I don't want to talk to you, you have nothing to tell me, if you're on Trump's side, that's the end of the issue. That's just not America. It's not the America I grew up in, or I went to Brooklyn College. We thought about everything, every issue. I grew up during McCarthyism. One of the professors at Brooklyn College who I had arguments with was Eugene Scalia, Justice Scalia's father, and we remained friends, and I remained friends with his son. I didn't agree with Justice Scalia about everything he wrote, but I love Justice Scalia as a person and as an individual, and we became good friends over time. I think that's the America I want to see us get back to.
You were actually kind enough, and I actually have never been to Martha's Vineyard, but you were kind enough to say, hey, listen, why don't you come? I have these talks. No. I mean,
yeah.
And I'm like you. If it's the right environment, I'll talk to anybody for as long as it takes. As a conservative, it's been my friends and people I know that are shouted down and threatened and literally run off the stage. It's gotten so bad. Look what they did to poor Sarah Huckabee, just taking her family to a restaurant. Look at what Secretary Nielsen had to go through in a restaurant and then at her home. And it's now also, you can add to that Pam Bondi and Steve Miller and Kellyanne Conway and the horrible things said about the president's son and granddaughter, who's 4 years old, and Melania and Ivanka. I don't know. I mean, I look, for example, at Judge Kavanaugh, and I read everything I possibly can. I had no dog in this race at all, and I know people did. And what I see is a guy that is a strong intellectual with incredible and impeccable, with an impeccable background that has written thoughtful, smart, well-researched opinions. Not all that I agree with, Obamacare being one of them. And I listened and I saw his family last night, and I heard his comments last night, and I read his comments in 2009 in the Minnesota Law Review, and I read his comments on originalism in 2006. And this guy is a real scholar.
He's not only a real scholar, but he's a scholar with an open mind. He's changed his mind about issues.
You're right.
I know because he's interacted with a number of my friends and colleagues at Harvard Law School. You can imagine they don't all agree with him. And people, for the most part, admire him and like him. There was an op-ed in today's New York Times by Akhil Amar, who's a very liberal Democrat. He cried when Donald Trump got elected. He was really so distraught. And he writes a column saying that this is a brilliant man, an open-minded man. I heard the same thing from several other colleagues who know him well. Am I going to agree with all of his opinions? Of course not. But what's happened to judicial confirmation, look, when Scalia came up for confirmation, it was, I think, 99-1 or something like that. Ginsburg, something over 90. Breyer. But now everything's along party lines, and The judiciary is becoming very politicized, and the Americans are the poorer for it. We need an independent judiciary. We need judges who are open-minded, nonpartisan, who will apply the law fairly the way they see it. Obviously, they're going to be influenced by their ideology, by their background, but nonetheless, they're doing it honestly in an attempt to implement the words of the Constitution.
You know, I loved his words when he said the job of a judge is to interpret the law, not to make law or make policy, to read the exact words in a statute, which
right.
is written by the legislative branch as written, and read the text of the Constitution as written, right. Mindful of history and tradition, right. And don't make up new constitutional rights, not in the text. Don't shy away from enforcing constitutional rights that are in the text. And he said changing the Constitution is for the amendment process. Changing policy is for our legislature.
No, I agree. And in my new book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, I take a very literal view of the impeachment criteria. The Constitution says to be impeached and removed, you have to be found guilty of treason, bribery, or other high crimes or misdemeanors. And some of the people on the left are saying, well, that doesn't mean what it says. Even if there's, kind of maladministration, that's good enough. Or if he does something bad in office that we don't approve of, that's bad enough. But that's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says you need 2/3 vote. You can't change that. Why should you be able to change bribery, high crimes and misdemeanors, treason? You can't change it. It's in the text of the Constitution. If you don't like it, amend the Constitution. But sometimes being a literalist gives you more rights because you literally have to apply the rights in the Constitution. And impeachment is a good example. And I lay it out as a liberal why I want to see the Constitution adhered to literally and very much in tune with what the framers had in mind.
Scalia once said a good judge must conclude as the law demands in spite of it, even if they personally do not like the decision. I thought that was pretty powerful.
Well, he once came to my class, and we taught together for 2 hours, and I put to him a bunch of quick cases where he had come to conclusions that I didn't agree with, and he said in the end, some of these were conclusions he didn't agree with, but he had to apply the law. Now, look, every judge deviates from that. Bush versus Gore was not the ideal example of nonpartisan law enforcement. You could take different views on that, but when you get a case that goes along party lines, you really have to wonder. But, 90% of the cases in the Supreme Court are not decided along party lines. You get Ginsburg joining with Roberts, and you get Kagan joining with Thomas. So it depends on the nature of the case. But, look, we all ought to have an open mind. We ought to listen. I haven't made up my mind about Kavanaugh. I want to hear what he says. I want to read more of what he's written. I, like some of the things he said, and I don't like other of the things he said. I want to hear what he believes about precedent. I don't care what he cares about a particular case, because when he's on the bench 30 years from now, those aren't going to be...
He's actually written about precedent.
We have to worry about our grandchildren. Yeah.
He said that the Constitution is written, the statute is written, but he also said mindful of history and tradition. I took that to mean precedents.
I did too. And I think that's right. And I think he will abide by precedent. Look, he's not going to overrule Roe versus Wade. He may not expand it, not extend it. He may look at it in a narrow way, but he's not going to overrule it.
Professor, this is a great question. Well, everybody fearmongers on Roe v. Wade. I would argue to you, and I think a lot of people think Roe v. Wade, that ends abortion in America. It does not. It would send it back to the states. And I would argue, I think I could make a strong case that in at least 48 states, maybe more, abortion would be legal. There would be different variations, in terms of restrictions or parental notification and such. But and states like New York and California and so many other blue states, they would be the most liberal laws in the country. It would not. Abortion is not at risk.
Let me throw a question.
And I'm pro-life, by the way.
It is reported that you supported Judge Barrett from the Seventh Circuit. Now, she has said that she believes the fetus is an innocent human being that deserves protection. Did that mean that she would not allow New York to permit abortion? Because she answered that too, though. She said that she like Scalia, because she wrote extensively on originalism, was a believer in that her own personal views will not impact her decisions. And she was very clear about that, and we must follow what the law and the Constitution demands. But the Constitution doesn't mention abortion at all, but it does say you can't be deprived of life without due process of law. And there are some right-to-lifers who say there should be a constitutional right to life, and a state can't take that away from you. There are three positions on abortion. The Roe versus Wade, privacy trumps the right to life. There is the position that says leave it to the states. Then there's the third position, not articulated by very many, which says that the fetus has a right that can't be taken away by the state. And what I would love to hear, because I think Judge Barrett may come up again for consideration.
I agree.
If Justice Ginsburg or anybody else, I'd love to hear her views on that issue.
I totally agree with you, and I think, there's also, remember when we had John Kennedy was running and he gave his speech on Catholicism.
Of course.
I mean,
it was one of the greatest speeches ever given.
One of the greatest speeches ever given. All right, your book is phenomenal, by the way. We put it up on Hannity.com. It's called The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Professor Alan Dershowitz, who has been with us, and sadly, he has been targeted and we're like, don't talk to Alan Dershowitz, which is ridiculous. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. All right, as we continue, Professor Alan Dershowitz of Harvard is with us. His brand new book, it's on Hannity.com, Amazon.com, bookstores everywhere. We only have about a minute and a half. Let me give it to you and just give us more information. I've been reading your book, and I'm absolutely loving it because it makes me think more than anything else. And you talk about a purity in terms of we have all got to be civil libertarians, especially with spies and campaigns and lying to FISA court judges. It really worries me.
I think that's right. And I think that civil liberties today may be used to protect President Trump. Tomorrow they're going to be used to protect the Democratic president and the rest of us. And that's why I'm so concerned about the civil liberties of President Trump and the constitutional rights, because if you can take away the constitutional rights of a president, you can take away the constitutional rights of everybody. And, as I've said, if Hillary Clinton had been elected and the Republicans were trying to impeach her or lock her up, I would have written the same book. It just would have had a different title. It would have said The Case Against Impeaching Clinton. I'd look at every fact. I'd look at all the cases. But I'm trying to be a neutral civil libertarian. I'm not trying to be a partisan defender of anybody. And I wish more Democrats and more Republicans would approach these problems in a neutral, objective way.
We can't criminalize differences. Paul Manafort's been convicted of nothing. It's a 2005 tax case, and 23 hours a day now for a month he's been locked up. That is not justice to me.
I agree with you, and Judge Ellis agrees with you, and he said that, he can't strike it down as illegal, but he was very upset about special counsel and about how
putting the screws to him to make him sing.
Make him not only sing, but compose. That's the issue.
Compose to me sounds like subornation of perjury, and so they can impeach or prosecute Trump. That's their goal. That's scary. That's not America to me.
It's not. No, I agree. We have to have neutral standards.
The Case Against Impeaching Trump, Professor Alan Dershowitz, thank you.